Hey everyone, today I want to have a little bit of a discussion topic regarding the top 5 features or top 5 returning features we want to see appear in the next mainline Monster Hunter game. Generation 6 essentially, whether that game is called Monster Hunter World 2, Paradise, Monster Hunter 6, or whatever the title ends up being. A lot of features that have been introduced in previous titles are some of the things that players want to see return for obvious reasons. They have made previous entries, simply put, better. And that is what we want to see, improvements on the franchise. So in this video, not only am I going to be talking about the things that I've seen most people kind of like demand that they want to see appear in the next entry. Some things are returning, some of the things are new, but more importantly, things that I also want to see make an appearance because I think they would probably end up making it the best Monster Hunter title. But at the same time, I certainly want to encourage you guys in the comments to let me know what it is that you want to see either return or make an appearance, things that you think will make the game better, features that will enrich the franchise. And I want to start from number 5, work our way to number 1, because number 5 is a relatively simple one, and that is not just monsters but fan favorites and monster variety. These are 3 separate tiers of things, but I think they're all kind of encompassing. First and foremost, I've made a separate video discussing just how much I would love for Capcom to make it so every single flagship from a previous generation, whichever one that is, and that also includes Frontiers, would be included in the base game experience. So we're talking Rathalos, we're talking Rathian, we're talking of course Kushala Daora, we're talking Teostra, we're talking Malzeno of course, and plenty more. Nargacuga, Zenogre, all of the monsters that everyone pretty much knows and love being included in the base game. Yes, they're of course going to add new ones. Yes, of course they're going to add even more returning ones that we haven't seen from previous games. But of course there should be a base, a working base of like 10 to 15 to 20 monsters that pretty much we just know they're locked down. Every single entry going forward, they are going to be included. I kind of coalesce this with something what like Pokemon is doing. We know that recent Pokemon entries do not include the entire Pokedex, and a lot of people have been upset about that. However, one of the things you will see them do is that of course they're going to include Mewtwo. Of course they include Pikachu. Of course they include like Charmander and Charmeleon and Charizard. These are fan favorites for a reason. They have been around for a long time, and the same idea here applies for Monster Hunter. Everyone wants to fight Rathalos because it's a fan favorite. It has been around for a long time. It is a feature monster, an easily recognizable staple of the franchise, and is a monster that everyone wants to see. At the same time, because every single flagship has been somewhat different, it does provide a lot of variety. A lot of these monsters have been pretty unique in their own way. That's why they became flagships to begin with, and it keeps the variety of monsters pretty much different. Something that Rise and Sunbreak did extremely well. One of the criticisms we saw in World and Iceborne was the lack of monster variety, and this time they would pretty much ensure that we do get tons of variety. Then at the same time, of course, it makes it for new fans of the franchise. Pretty much anyone who's going to decide to jump in the future entry will have pretty much a little bit of a understanding as to like, this is what things used to be like, this is what players used to like to hunt. But of course I personally like the newer ones, or whatever the case is, but they do get a flavor of what the old games used to offer, and bring in of course those flagships from previous titles definitely goes a long way. It also makes it extremely easy for marketing for Capcom. I mean, you know, there's just every single trailer that they reveal, they show a flagship and then they show a new monster. Come on, it writes itself. It makes things extremely easy for them to sell people on the next game. Secondly, number 4 in this list would have to be mounts, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Palamute. Remember that on World and Iceborne we did get the introduction of mounts in some way, where you had, you know, smaller monsters pretty much becoming available for you to be able to mount and carry you around and get you from place to place. And then Rise and Sunbreak included Palamutes, and they have now become a little bit of a staple. They have become fan favorites in their own way, and they are extremely extremely good for what they do, and they pretty much get you from point A to point B because maps are ever getting bigger. And if we are, sadly as I say this, the next mainline game, if it does become open world, which is one of the things that I do dread, and I've spoken about that multiple times, then of course having some sort of transportation system, something that you can ride around faster than just normal traversal, will go a long way. So whether they choose to bring back Palamutes, or they decide to give us something else, something different, or bring in Palamutes on top of smaller monsters that you can ride, then at the end of the day, that's completely fine. But giving us a traversal option would go a long way. The third one in this list, and features that I do want to see them kind of like bring back, I think, would be some sort of in combat access to, for you to be able to kind of like either weave out of the way from certain attacks or get closer to the monster without having to rely on the weapon that you use. And essentially I'm referring to either wire bugs or silkbind attacks and clutch claw. So some type of combination of both, I think, would go a long way. Let's remember, clutch claw was limited in the sense that it was only usable in certain moments in combat, and it was very much for you to be able to mount the monster in his own way. Of course, in Rise and Sunbreak, mounting became his very own thing, and wire bugs were there for you to have escapability and maneuverability around the arena and throughout combat. I think that some sort of fixture, and yes, they can get you closer to the monster. A lot of people don't use wire bugs like that. They actually use them to just evade, and they use them to, kind of like do their silkbind attacks, but they don't necessarily use them to get closer to the monster or kind of like pivot around or move around too much. I think making them less powerful in that sense, where they are less reliant on your combo attacks or your combo skills through silkbind attacks, but at the same time make them more or lesser reliable, that you have an instant dodge, but at the same time also they provide a little bit of a movement option like the clutch claw did, I think would go a long way. I do agree that might be a little bit contradictory, that I'm saying I do want to see them come back, but also nerfed and somewhat. It might be something that a lot of players don't want to see, but I do think that wire bugs, as of they currently are in Sunbreak, I think they make the game a little bit too easy, and people use them as a crutch. I find myself using them as a crutch. I rely on them extremely, basically for recoverability or for dodging, and I don't think they were ever designed for that. Your character already has plenty of maneuverability already, and something that you should just probably naturally do as you're learning your bread and butter combos, for you to be able to kind of like get the best damage output, if you will, for whatever weapon it is that you're using. Now, number 2 and number 1, the two main features that I want to see kind of like reappear for the next mainline game, I think they go in tandem, and I think if you have been watching my videos for years now, you know exactly what it is that I'm gonna say. And of course, I'm talking about cross saves. I guess that would be number 2, but the main one is cross play. Now, this has been pretty much a sticking point for a lot of players now for 2 full-on releases. Back in Monster Hunter World, this is something that people, even back then, many years ago, were demanding for Capcom to do. Many players hoped that Iceborne would actually go ahead and correct things, and of course it didn't. You still had pretty much PlayStation players locked into their own consoles, Xbox players in their own thing, and PC players in their own world, and they said, wait a minute, well, maybe the next mainline game will go ahead and fix it. Well, it didn't. The next mainline game was a Nintendo Switch title, Monster Hunter Rise, and then once it dropped on PC, and then once it dropped on PlayStation, Xbox, and Windows, it didn't actually ever include crossplay and cross saves, and Capcom gave this very wonky explanation as to why they couldn't do it. And the argument simply was that the game wasn't designed with that in mind, which is like not really something that holds up nowadays, because so many Nintendo Switch titles do have crossplay, they have cross saves with PC. I would understand if they wouldn't necessarily want to do that with Xbox, PlayStation, or PC, but at the same time, and this is where I want to bring this up because this is something that's been happening a little bit lately as of right now, and that is even companies like EA have realized if for their franchises to continue to exist, their sports franchises like Madden and FIFA, which is now called FC football or whatever, and plenty of those, they have to have crossplay. NBA 2K has now crossplay. All of the newer sports massive titles, those big money makers, have had it. Call of Duty in the past few years ended up getting crossplay. So like There's no real excuse for Capcom not to do this anymore. Monster Hunter is their biggest franchise, bigger than Street Fighter, bigger than Resident Evil. It does make them more money than those games, and it does need to show. They cannot keep treating players like they have to be segmented off because they have no real reasoning behind it. So crossplay is pretty much a staple now in modern gaming in 2023. It'll become even more prevalent heading into the future, especially as we get more, actual current gen titles for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X, and presumably the next Switch. And at the same time, cross saves is just kind of like imminent. It's something that almost every major title does now. You can load up your save into the cloud. Of course, you have to have some sort of subscription, whether it is PlayStation Plus or Xbox Game Pass or whatever. But of course, as long as you have that, you have access to online servers and you have access to cloud savings, which means you carry over your save whatever it is that you want. Even Nintendo has that nowadays. So there's no real excuse now. And for the next mainline game, I think those two features are intertwined and things that players need to demand. If Capcom really honestly comes out later this year, hopefully, if they end up revealing this next game, and they say that they're still not going to implement it, I'm going to be one of those channels that honestly will probably end up banging the drum the loudest. Only because to me, this is just baseline features that need to be included for players. If you don't want to include laggy, or you don't want to include Rathalos or whatever, some mainline monsters in the franchise, you don't want to put mounts, you don't want to bring in investigations back, or monster tracking, or underwater combat, and then on top of that you say to players, hey, by the way, no crossplay, no cross saves, you are messing up big time. Even if they're chasing money with open world or season passes and all that kind of crappy junk that a lot of other games are doing, I think it would be something that they are heavily missing out on and not listening to the community, because once again, the community has been very loud about this. They want crossplay, they want cross saves, and Capcom should be listening to fans. But certainly do let me know in the comments what it is that you want to see. 5 features, 3 features, just one main feature you want to have for the next mainline game that will certainly make you very excited to pick it up. If you're brand new to my channel, though, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.